The mist clung to the cobblestone streets of Ravens Creek like a phantom refusing to depart, shrouding the harbour town in a perpetual, melancholic grey. It was the year 1895, and the industrial soot of the new century had not yet fully stained the pristine, if somewhat ominous, beauty of this coastal enclave in Maine. For Evelyn Thorne, the damp chill was not merely weather. It was a constant companion that seeped into her bones as she scrubbed the linens of the town's elite in the icy waters of the communal wash basin. Evelyn was a woman whose beauty had once been the toast of the underground cabaret scene in New York, a past that followed her to this puritanical town like a scarlet shadow. Her hands, once adorned with velvet gloves, were now red and raw. The skin cracked from lye soap and freezing currents. She was a widow, though the town whispered that she had never been truly wed. Her husband, a kind but frail dock worker named Thomas, had perished 2 years prior, claimed by the unforgiving sea during a nor'easter. Since then, Evelyn had become the object of scorn and silent judgment. The respectable matrons pulled their skirts aside when she passed. The merchants inflated their prices for her, and the churchgoers offered prayers for her soul while starving her body of dignity. Yet Evelyn bore it all with a stoic grace that infuriated them. She had a reason to endure, a reason that shone brighter than any gemstone she had worn in her former life. Her 5-year-old daughter, Lily was a creature of light in their dark world, possessing wild curls the color of autumn leaves, and eyes that seemed to see the world not as it was, but as it could be. While Evelyn worked her fingers to the bone, Lily would play near the old abandoned municipal buildings that loomed over the town square, structures of Gothic stone that whispered of a history Ravens Creek preferred to forget. On this particular Tuesday morning, the fog was dense, muffling the sounds of the harbour bells. Evelyn was wringing out a heavy woolen coat belonging to the mayor, her mind occupied with the arithmetic of survival. $2 for the rent, 50 cents for coal, barely enough left for flour. She did not notice that Lily had ventured further than usual, drawn by a strange melodic humming emanating from the barred ventilation grates of the old jail, a dungeon beneath the town hall that had not housed a prisoner in decades. The old jail was a place of local legend, said to be haunted by those accused of witchcraft centuries ago. But the figure Lily found was no ghost. Peering through the rusted iron bars, her small hands gripping the cold metal, she saw a man in the shadows. He was slumped against the damp stone wall, heavy chains of silver, a metal that seemed to burn his skin, binding his wrists and ankles. He was not humming. He was groaning in a low, resonant agony that vibrated against the stones. He was breathtakingly beautiful in a terrifying way, with skin as pale as moonlight and hair like spun midnight. When he sensed the child, he ceased his noise and turned. His eyes were not human. They were pools of crimson and violet, glowing faintly in the dark. A normal child would have screamed. Lily Thorne simply tilted her head. "Don't cry, mister," Lily whispered, her voice cutting through the damp silence of the dungeon. "My mama says, crying washes the sad away." "But you have to stop eventually," the stranger recoiled, shielding his face as if her innocence were a blinding light. He had been starving for 3 months, denied the crimson sustenance he required, weakened by the silver that suppressed his supernatural vitality. He was Alistair Sterling, the ancient guardian of this territory, the vampire king whose existence kept true monsters at bay until his betrayal. To see a human child so close, pulsating with life, should have triggered his predatory instincts. Instead, looking into her fearless eyes, he felt a pang of forgotten humanity. "I am not crying, little one," he rasped, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "I am fading." "My mama can save you," Lily declared with the absolute confidence of youth. She fixes everything. She fixes the coats. She fixes the dolls. She fixes the hurts." Alistair laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "No one can save me, child. I'm monster to some, myth to others. Go away before the dark consumes you too." But Lily was already scrambling up. "Wait here," she commanded, as if he had anywhere else to go. She ran back through the fog, her small boots slapping against the wet stones, finding her mother by the wash basin. "Mama, Mama, there is a king in the basement. He is hungry, and he has silver bracelets that hurt him." Evelyn wiped her soapy hands on her apron, exhausted. "Lily, we do not tell stories. The old jail is empty." "No!" Lily stomped her foot. "He is pale like the moon, and his eyes are magic. He says he is fading. He has no one. Mama, just like us." That phrase struck Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. Just like us, alone, misunderstood, judged. She looked at her daughter's pleading face. Inside, packing up her washboard, she grabbed the small bundle of bread and cheese she had saved for their lunch. "Show me," she said, expecting a homeless drifter. She did not expect to walk into a destiny that would rewrite the history of Ravens Creek. The descent into the old jail was treacherous. The stone steps were slick with moss, and the air grew colder with every meter they descended, carrying a metallic scent that tasted of ancient blood and rain. Evelyn held a kerosene lantern high, its flickering orange light pushing back the oppressive darkness. Lily skipped ahead, unafraid, leading her mother to the heavy oak door reinforced with iron bands. A small viewing grate allowed them to see inside. When Evelyn raised the lantern, the light spilled into the cell, revealing the prisoner. She gasped, nearly dropping the lantern. This was no ordinary drifter. The man chained to the wall possessed an aura of majesty that even filth and chains could not obscure. His clothes, though torn and stained, were of a cut and fabric she recognized from her days in the high society cabarets: fine silk, velvet collars, styles that whispered of timeless wealth. But it was his face that arrested her. High cheekbones, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and those eyes, violet and swirling with a hunger that made her knees tremble. He looked up, his lips curled in a snarl that softened instantly upon seeing the woman standing beside the child. "You brought a woman," he whispered, his voice holding a hypnotic cadence. "Are you mad, child? Do you not know what I am?" "I know you are suffering," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. She had seen many men look at her with hunger, but this was different. This was a primal existential starvation. "My daughter says you are unjustly held. Who are you?" He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a century, Alistair Sterling felt shame. "I am Alistair," he said simply, "and I am dangerous to you." Evelyn unlocked the heavy door. The lock was old and simple, easily picked with a hairpin, a trick she had learned in her youth to escape less pleasant rooms. She stepped inside, placing the bread and cheese on the floor. "I cannot eat that," Alistair said, looking at the food with distaste. "It is ash to me." Evelyn observed him closely. The pallor, the sensitivity to the silver chains, the predatory stillness. Myths were common in Ravens Creek, whispered by grandmothers: vampires, the undead. She should have fled, but she saw the wounds on his wrists where the silver burned him. She saw the profound loneliness in his posture. "Then what do you eat?" she asked, though she suspected the answer. Alistair remained silent, closing his eyes. "I will not harm you. I would rather starve for another century than spill innocent blood." "You are the owner of the Sterling estate," Evelyn realized suddenly. The Sterling estate was the largest property in the county, shuttered for months. Rumors said the master was traveling in Europe, and you are being held by your cousin Dorian. Alistair's eyes snapped open. My half-brother, he corrected. He covets my title. He covets my power. He lured me here under a banner of truce and shackled me with consecrated silver. Evelyn stepped closer, ignoring the warning growl in his throat. Dorian Sterling is the man who raised the rents on the tenement houses last week. He is the man who fired the dock workers. He is a plague, Alistair agreed. And I am the only cure. Yet I am bound. Evelyn looked at the bread, then at her own wrist, then back to his eyes. She took a small knife from her pocket, one she used to cut loose threads. If you do not eat, you die. Does a king die? Alistair looked at the knife, horrified and mesmerized. I am immortal, but I can wither into a husk, conscious, but unable to move for eternity. That is Dorian's plan. Evelyn rolled up her sleeve. The logic of the washerwoman took over, practicality above fear. I have given my blood and sweat to this town for pennies, she said softly. I can spare a few drops for justice. No, Alistair refused, straining against the chains. I will not take from you. It is not taking if it is given, Evelyn replied. She made a small, precise cut on her forearm. The scent of copper filled the small cell, intoxicating and heavy. Alistair's pupils dilated until his eyes were entirely black. He trembled, fighting the monster inside. Evelyn knelt before him, offering her arm not as a victim, but as a savior. Drink, she commanded gently. Regain your strength. Save yourself so you can save this town. With a groan that sounded like a prayer, Alistair leaned forward. He did not bite. He simply pressed his lips to the small wound, lapping the drops with a reverence that shattered Evelyn's composure. It was not violent. It was the most intimate moment of her life. As he drank, color returned to his marble skin. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to bend toward him, welcoming their master back. He pulled away long before he took too much, licking the wound closed with a tongue that felt like cool silk. The cut healed instantly, leaving no scar. He looked up at her, his violet eyes burning with a new, terrifying intensity. You have bound me to you, Evelyn Thorne, he whispered, knowing her name without being told. Blood given freely creates a bond deeper than marriage. You have awakened the king. Evelyn pulled her sleeve down, her head spinning slightly, not from blood loss, but from the sudden, undeniable connection that snapped into place between them, a tether of souls. The days that followed fell into a strange, secretive rhythm. Evelyn continued her backbreaking work by day, but her nights belonged to the old jail. She did not feed him blood again. He refused, stating that the initial offering was enough to sustain his consciousness, though not his full power. Instead, she brought him raw meat from the butcher, claiming it was for a stray dog, and more importantly, she brought him company. While the town slept, the washerwoman and the vampire king spoke. He told her of the centuries he had seen, of the wars fought in shadows, of the loneliness of immortality. She told him of her childhood, of the mistakes she made, of the love she had for Thomas and the fierce protection she felt for Lily. They judge you, Alistair observed one night, his voice stronger, echoing with a velvety timbre that made the stone walls vibrate. I hear them in the square above. They call you fallen. They do not know that you stand taller than any of them. Evelyn sat on a wooden crate she had dragged in, stitching a tear in her dress. Reputation is a luxury for the wealthy, Alistair. I have survival. That is enough. It is not enough, he growled, the chains rattling. When I am free, they will kneel before you, not because I command it, but because they will see what I see. And how will you be free? Evelyn asked, steering the conversation to the practical. The silver is enchanted. Physical force cannot break it. Dorian holds the key of Solomon, Alistair explained, an artifact of dark magic. He keeps it close, likely in the study of the Sterling Manor. He cannot destroy me, so he binds me. As long as the key exists and stays in his possession, I'm trapped. Evelyn stopped stitching. Sterling Manor. I used to sew dresses for Dorian's wife before she passed. Dorian has no wife, Alistair corrected. He had a captive. She fled years ago. He is hosting a masquerade ball in 3 days, Evelyn said, remembering the gossip she had overheard at the market, to celebrate his inheritance of the estate. All the servants are being hired for the night. Alistair looked at her, fear flashing in his eyes. No, do not think it. I can get in, Evelyn said, her mind already racing. They need help in the kitchens, in the laundry. I am invisible to them, Alistair. I am the furniture, I am the dust. Dorian is not just a man, Alistair warned. He is a Dampier, half human, half vampire. He has the cunning of your kind, and the cruelty of mine. He will smell my blood in your veins. Then I will mask it, Evelyn said, standing up. I know herbs. I know scents. And I know the layout of that house better than he does. She walked to the bars, placing her hand against his cold cheek. You fought for this town in the shadows for 100 years. Let me fight for you in the light. Alistair leaned into her touch, closing his eyes. The bond between them pulsed, a warm golden thread in the cold dampness. He realized then that he was not just fighting to reclaim his throne, he was fighting to build a world worthy of her. If you go, he said intensely, take the vial of holy water from the church font. It will not kill him, but it will burn him. And take this. He concentrated, and a ring materialized on his finger, a signet ring of onyx and silver. He pulled it off, wincing as the silver burned him, and passed it through the bars. This is my crest. It has no magic to help you. But if you are cornered, show it to the oldest servant, Barnaby. He is loyal to the bloodline, not the usurper. He thinks me dead. Evelyn took the heavy, cold ring and strung it on a ribbon around her neck, tucking it beneath her dress. It rested against her heart, humming with a low, protective vibration. I will return, she promised, and I will bring the key. The night of the masquerade ball, Ravens Creek was transformed. Carriages lined the driveway of Sterling Manor, delivering guests in silks and satins, their faces hidden behind masks of velvet and papier-mâché. The mansion was ablaze with electric lights, a novelty that Dorian flaunted. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, roasting pheasant and champagne. Evelyn entered through the servants' entrance, her head down, wearing the drab grey uniform of the scullery maids. No one looked at her. To the high society of Ravens Creek, she was merely a pair of hands to take a coat or scrub a spill. She navigated the chaotic kitchens, blending in with the frantic staff. She found Barnaby, the ancient butler, polishing silver in the pantry. He looked frail, his eyes clouded with sorrow. Evelyn approached him, checking to ensure they were alone. "Mr. Barnaby," she whispered. The old man jumped. "Who are you? You aren't on the roster." "I am a friend of the true master," Evelyn said, pulling the ribbon from her dress. The onyx ring swung in the candlelight. Barnaby gasped, dropping a spoon. "Master Alistair! He lives!" "He is imprisoned beneath the town hall," Evelyn hissed. "Dorian betrayed him. I need the key, Barnaby, the dark iron key." Barnaby's face hardened, the years melting away to reveal a core of steel loyalty. "The master's study," he whispered. "Third floor, east wing. Dorian keeps it around his neck even when he sleeps. But tonight he is drunk on power. He has taken the key off to wear the ancestral medallion for the party. It is in the obsidian box on his desk. Guard the hallway," Evelyn said. "If anyone comes, break a vase." Evelyn slipped up the back stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The music from the ballroom below, a waltz, filtered up, ghostly and distorted. She reached the third floor. The hallway was empty. She slipped into the study. It was a room of dark mahogany and leather, smelling of stale cigar smoke and something copper-like. Blood. Dorian had been feeding. She rushed to the desk. There was the obsidian box. She reached for it, her fingers trembling. A washerwoman in the master's study. A smooth, oily voice came from the shadows. Evelyn froze. Dorian Sterling stepped out from behind the velvet curtains. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp way, his eyes lacking the depth of Alistair's, filled instead with a flat reptilian malice. "I smelled you the moment you entered the house. You smell of lavender and him." He lunged with supernatural speed, grabbing Evelyn by the throat and lifting her off the ground. She kicked, clawing at his hands, but his grip was iron. "Tell me," Dorian sneered, his fangs extending, "how does my brother taste? Did he drain you dry, or are you his new pet?" Evelyn couldn't breathe. Black spots dancing in her vision. She remembered Alistair's warning, "Holy water." She reached into her apron pocket, her fingers closing around the glass vial. With her last ounce of strength, she uncorked it and smashed it against Dorian's face. The liquid sizzled like acid on his skin. He screamed, dropping her. Evelyn fell to the floor, gasping. She didn't run for the door. She lunged for the obsidian box. She grabbed the heavy iron key, cold as ice. Dorian was clawing at his face, his skin blistering. "You witch!" he howled. "I will tear you apart!" Evelyn scrambled toward the window. It was 3 stories down, but there was a trellis covered in thick ivy. She didn't hesitate. She threw herself out the window, grasping at the vines. They tore at her hands, but she held on, sliding, falling, tumbling into the dark garden below. She hit the earth hard, twisting her ankle, but adrenaline masked the pain. She had the key. She ran into the night, the screams of the usurper echoing behind her. Evelyn limped through the fog, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Every shadow seemed to contain a monster. Every rustle of leaves sounded like Dorian's pursuit. She reached the town hall, bypassing the sleeping guard at the main entrance, and practically fell down the stairs to the dungeon. "Alistair!" she cried out as she reached the heavy door. She fumbled with the lock, threw the door open, and collapsed inside. Alistair was upright instantly, straining against the chains, his eyes wide with terror and rage as he saw her torn dress, the bruises forming on her neck. "He touched you!" Alistair roared, the sound shaking dust from the ceiling. "He dared to lay a hand on you!" "I have it," Evelyn panted, holding up the iron key. It pulsed with a sick green light. "The key?" She dragged herself toward him. "Hurry, Evelyn!" Alistair urged, his voice desperate. "I can feel him coming. He is close." Evelyn crawled to the manacles on his ankles first. She inserted the key. It turned with a sound like a bone breaking. The silver shackles clicked open and fell away. Alistair gasped as the power rushed back into his legs, but he did not move. "The wrists!" he commanded. Evelyn stood on her good leg, reaching up to his wrists. Her hands were shaking. The heavy door behind them slammed open. Dorian stood there, half his face burned and regenerating slowly, looking like a demon from hell. "Touching!" he spat. "Truly touching." He raised a pistol, not loaded with lead, but with wood bullets carved from coffin lids. "Step away from him, woman, and I might make your death quick." Evelyn didn't step away. She shielded Alistair with her own body. "No," she said firmly. "You will not hurt him again." Dorian laughed. "Love, how pathetic." He aimed the gun at Evelyn's heart. The trigger finger tightened. The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the small space. Evelyn flinched, waiting for the pain. It never came. In the fraction of a second before the bullet fired, Evelyn had turned the key in the final lock. Alistair's hand was free. Faster than thought, faster than a bullet, he had broken the final chain and moved. He stood in front of Evelyn, catching the wooden bullet in his bare hand. Splinters dug into his palm, but he didn't care. He crushed the wood into dust. The air in the room dropped 20 degrees. The shadows detached themselves from the walls and swirled around Alistair, forming a cloak of pure darkness. He was no longer the prisoner. He was the king. "Hello, brother," Alistair said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a collapsing mountain. Dorian took a step back, the gun shaking in his hand. "Impossible. You were starved." "I was fed," Alistair said, glancing back at Evelyn, "by a heart stronger than yours ever was." He moved. It was a blur of motion. One moment he was by Evelyn. The next he had Dorian by the throat, pinning him against the wall where Alistair had been chained for months. "I should end you," Alistair whispered, his fangs fully extended, "for the treason, for the theft, but mostly for the bruise on her neck." Dorian whimpered, his legs dangling. "Mercy, brother, we are blood." "You forfeited that blood when you spilled hers," Alistair snarled. He raised his hand to deliver the killing blow. "Alistair, stop!" Evelyn's voice cut through the red haze of his rage. He froze. "Don't!" she said, limping forward. "Don't kill him, not in front of us, not like this. If you kill him, you are the monster he says you are. Show him a king's justice." Alistair looked at the trembling traitor in his grip, then at the woman who had saved him. The red faded from his eyes, replaced by the violet of his nobility. He dropped Dorian. The half-breed fell to the floor, gasping. "You are banished," Alistair pronounced coldly. "Leave Raven's Creek. If you are found within 100 miles of this place by sunrise, I will not be the one who hunts you. I will release the Wolf Guard. Go." Dorian scrambled up and fled without a backward glance, disappearing into the night like a rat scuttling from the light. Alistair turned to Evelyn. The darkness dissipated. He was just a man again, a man looking at the woman he loved. He scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "We are going home," he said. The return of Alistair Sterling to the manor was the scandal of the decade. The illness that had kept him away was cited as the reason for his absence, and Dorian's sudden departure was explained as a business disagreement. But the true shock came the following Sunday. A carriage arrived at the small, dilapidated cottage where Evelyn and Lily lived. It was a carriage of black lacquer and gold trim, pulled by 4 black stallions. Alistair stepped out, dressed in a morning suit of impeccable tailoring, blinking slightly in the sunlight, but standing tall. The neighbours peeked from behind their curtains. The matrons gasped. Alistair walked to the door and knocked. Evelyn opened it, wearing her simple Sunday dress. "The manor is too big," Alistair said loud enough for the neighbours to hear. "It echoes. It needs life. It needs light." He looked down at Lily, who was peeking around Evelyn's skirt. "And it needs a library for a little girl who likes stories." "Are you asking me to be your maid?" Evelyn asked, a playful glint in her eye, though her heart pounded. "I am asking you to be the lady of the house," Alistair said, dropping to one knee on the dusty porch. He pulled a ring from his pocket, not the signet ring, but a diamond that caught the sun and fractured it into 1,000 rainbows. "I cannot offer you a normal life, Evelyn. I am a creature of the night, though I walk in the day for you. I offer you eternity. I offer you protection. I offer you my heart, which beat for the first time in a century when you entered my cell." "Yes," Evelyn whispered. "Yes." The wedding was small, held in the private chapel of the Sterling estate. There were no guests from the high society that had shunned Evelyn. Instead, the pews were filled with the people who mattered. Barnaby sat in the front row, weeping silently. The butcher, who had sold Evelyn the meat scraps, was there. The few other washerwomen who had been kind to her were there, and Lily, wearing a dress of white silk, stood as the maid of honour. As they exchanged vows, Alistair made a promise that wasn't in the script. "I vow to use my power to protect the weak," he said, looking at Evelyn, "to ensure that no one in Raven's Creek ever feels as invisible as you did. You have not just married a man, Evelyn. You have married the guardian of this land, and you are its queen." 12 years passed. Ravens Creek changed under the stewardship of the Sterlings. The tenements were renovated, the wages were raised. An orphanage was built named the Lily House. The mysterious Alistair Sterling was rarely seen during the high noon sun, but in the evenings he and his wife would walk the promenade. He never aged. Evelyn did. Silver began to streak her hair. Lines appeared around her eyes. But Alistair looked at her with more adoration each year than the last. The mirror in the master bedroom of Stirling Manor was an antique from Versailles, silver-backed and brutally honest. On a Tuesday morning in late October 1907, Evelyn stood before it, tracing the delicate map of lines that had begun to claim the corners of her eyes. She pulled a single strand of silver hair from her brush, holding it up against the pale morning light. It shimmered like a spiderweb, a stark contrast to the raven locks that Alistair loved so dearly. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 8 times, a heavy, rhythmic reminder that time was a thief who never slept. Alistair entered the room silently, as he always did. He moved like smoke, a presence felt before seen. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. In the mirror, the contrast was heartbreaking. He looked exactly as he had the day she found him in the dungeon, skin like marble, eyes like violets, not a day older than 35, though he was nearing his 300th year. Evelyn, now approaching her late 30s, looked healthy and vibrant, but mortal. The elixir slowed the clock, but it could not stop the hands completely. "You are staring at the thief again," Alistair whispered, his voice vibrating against her neck. He kissed the spot where her pulse beat, a steady human rhythm. "I am staring at the truth, Alistair," Evelyn replied softly, leaning back into his cold, solid strength. "Lily leaves for the university in Boston in 2 days. The house will be quiet, and I will continue to fade while you remain burning bright." Alistair turned her around, his expression fierce. "You are not fading. You are ripening. A statue is beautiful, Evelyn, but it is cold stone. A garden is beautiful because it changes, because it grows. You are my garden." Their tender moment was interrupted by a sound that made Alistair stiffen. The distant, mournful howl of a wolf, not a natural wolf, but a timber wolf the size of a pony. It was the signal of the Wolf Guard, the sentinels Alistair employed to patrol the borders of his territory. A howl in daylight meant only one thing. An intruder of supernatural origin had crossed the river. The intruder arrived not with an army, but in a solitary black carriage, with the blinds drawn tight. It rolled through the town square of Ravens Creek, ignoring the bustling market, and headed straight for the iron gates of Stirling Manor. Lily, who was sitting on the porch steps reading a medical textbook, felt the temperature drop 10 degrees before the carriage even stopped. Since childhood, Lily had possessed a sensitivity to the unseen, a side effect perhaps of growing up in a house saturated with ancient magic. She closed her book, her heart beating a warning rhythm. Alistair and Evelyn met the carriage in the driveway. Barnaby the butler stood by the door, his hand trembling slightly on the latch. The carriage door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was tall, impossibly thin, dressed in mourning weeds of black lace that seemed to swallow the light around her. Her skin was not pale like Alistair's. It was grey, like ash. Her eyes were milky white, blind, yet she turned her head unerringly toward Alistair. "Alistair!" the woman rasped. Her voice sounded like grinding stones. "You have grown fat on domestic bliss." Alistair placed a protective hand in front of Evelyn. "Saraphina, the Council of Shadows does not leave London. Why are you here?" Saraphina smiled, revealing teeth that were serrated like a shark's. The council hears whispers, King of Maine. We hear that you walk in the daylight. We hear that you cohabit with cattle. We hear that you play at being human. These are infractions, but we ignored them, for you kept the territory stable." She took a step forward, sniffing the air. She turned her blind face toward Lily, who had come to stand beside her mother. "But now we hear you have created a hybrid, an abomination." "Lily is human," Evelyn said, her voice sharp and fearless. She stepped past Alistair, confronting the ancient vampire. "She is my daughter. She is of my blood and my late husband's." Saraphina laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Human? She has lived in the aura of a vampire king for 12 years. She has eaten food grown in soil watered by magic. She sees the spirits, does she not?" Saraphina pointed a skeletal finger at Lily. "The girl is a beacon, and the council has decided she is too dangerous to leave unchecked. If she is human, she leaves with me to be tested. If she survives, she returns. If she is something else, she belongs to us." Alistair's growl was low and terrifying. The sky darkened as his mood influenced the weather. "She goes nowhere. Step off my land, Saraphina, or I will forget the laws of hospitality." "Then it is war," Saraphina said simply. "Not with armies, Alistair. We are past that. A war of pestilence. Until you surrender the girl, Raven's Creek will suffer. The fog will bring fever, the crops will rot, the cattle will die. You love these humans so much. Let us see how much they love you when you are the cause of their ruin." By evening, the threat had manifested. A thick yellow fog rolled off the ocean, smelling of sulfur and stagnant water. In the town, healthy men collapsed, coughing. The fish in the harbor floated belly up. The panic in Raven's Creek was immediate. For 12 years, under Alistair's protection, they had forgotten fear. Now it returned, amplified by the unknown. In the library of the manor, the mood was grim. Alistair paced the room, the ancient energy crackling around him, making the gas lamps flicker. "I cannot fight a plague with claws," he admitted, frustration evident in his voice. "Saraphina is a necromancer. She poisons the very life force of the land. If I attack her, the curse solidifies. She must lift it willingly." Lily sat in the corner, her face pale. "I should go," she whispered. "If I go with her, the town is saved." "Absolutely not," Evelyn and Alistair said in unison. Evelyn walked to the window, looking out at the dying garden. Her mind, the mind of the washerwoman who had solved the puzzle of the old jail, was working furiously. Vampires like Saraphina understood power, blood, and ancient laws, but they did not understand humanity. They underestimated the bond between the protector and the protected. "Saraphina relies on the town turning against us," Evelyn said, turning to her husband. "She expects the townspeople to march here with pitchforks and demand we hand Lily over to save themselves. That is how it has always happened in history, isn't it? The mob sacrifices the innocent to appease the monster." Alistair nodded. "Fear breaks loyalty. It is the oldest weapon." "Then we must prove that Raven's Creek is different," Evelyn declared. "We do not hide Lily. We do not barricade the doors. We go to the town. We tell them the truth, all of it." "Evelyn," Alistair warned gently, "they accept me because I am a benevolent landlord who keeps his distance. If they know a demon is poisoning their children because of us—" "Then let them decide," Evelyn said firmly. "I washed their clothes, Alistair. I know these people. They are stubborn. They are proud. And they hate being bullied by outsiders more than they fear magic." The town meeting was held in the nave of the church, the only building large enough to hold the angry, coughing crowd. The air was thick with sickness and fear. When Alistair and Evelyn entered, silence fell. Alistair did not wear his aristocratic finery. He wore simple, dark clothes. Evelyn held his hand. Lily stood behind them terrified, but holding her head high. Evelyn stepped up to the pulpit. She did not look like a lady of the manor. She looked like Evelyn Thorne, the woman who had scrubbed their stains for pennies. "You are sick," Evelyn began, her voice ringing clear without a tremor. "Your livestock is dying, and there is a woman at my gates who says she will stop it all if I give her my daughter." A murmur went through the crowd. Mrs. Higgins, the baker's wife, stood up, clutching a coughing child. "Then give her the girl. Why should my boy die for yours?" Alistair stiffened, ready to intervene, but Evelyn held up a hand. "You ask a fair question, Martha. Why should you suffer for us? 12 years ago, this town was dying a different death. The rents were high, the docks were unsafe, and the shadows were full of things that wanted to eat you." "Alistair, stop that. He has poured his fortune into this town. He has guarded your borders." "He is a vampire," a man shouted from the back. "Yes," Evelyn shouted back, "he is, and he is the most human man I have ever known. He chose you. He chose this town over his own kind. Now his own kind has come to punish him for that choice. Saraphina doesn't just want Lily. She wants to prove that you are weak. She wants to prove that at the first sign of trouble you will betray the neighbors who have stood by you." Evelyn walked down from the pulpit and stood in front of Mrs. Higgins. She touched the feverish child's forehead. "I cannot force you to stand with us. If you want us to surrender Lily, say the word, but know this. A monster who poisons children to get her way will not stop with Lily. Once she has my daughter, she will own this town. She will know that you can be broken by fear." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Mrs. Higgins looked at Evelyn, then at Alistair, who stood not as a threatening king, but as a father protecting his child. She looked at the feverish boy in her arms. "The sterlings paid for the doctor when my leg broke," a dock worker grunted from the side aisle. "Didn't ask for a penny back." "The Lady Evelyn brought soup when my husband passed," another woman whispered. Mrs. Higgins took a deep breath. She looked at Evelyn. "We don't trade children in Raven's Creek," and she said firmly, "not to anyone, not to monsters." A rumble of agreement went through the room. It grew louder, a chorus of defiance. They were frightened, yes, but Evelyn was right. They were stubborn Mainers. They would not be dictated to by a stranger in the fog. "So what do we do?" the dock worker asked. Alistair stepped forward. His violet eyes glowed, not with hunger, but with power. "Saraphina draws power from the fog. She is hiding in the marshlands, channeling the decay. She thinks she is safe because I cannot enter the holy ground of the old cemetery where she has set her circle. But she forgot one thing." "What?" Mrs. Higgins asked. "She forgot that I am not the only guardian here." Alistair smiled grimly. "She is fighting a vampire. She is not expecting to fight a town." The battle for Raven's Creek was not fought with swords, but with light and iron. Under Alistair's direction, the townspeople gathered every lantern, every torch, every piece of iron scrap from the shipyard. At midnight they marched to the marshlands. Alistair could not enter the consecrated ground of the old cemetery, but the people of Raven's Creek could. Led by Evelyn and the burly dock workers, 300 townspeople surrounded the fog-shrouded graveyard. "Now!" Evelyn commanded. Simultaneously, 300 torches were lit. The sudden blaze of fire pushed back the supernatural fog. The ironworkers began to beat on old ship hulls they had dragged with them, a cacophony of ringing iron that disrupted the delicate necrotic magic Saraphina was weaving. In the center of the cemetery, Saraphina shrieked, her concentration broken by the assault of light and sound, her connection to the plague severed. The fog evaporated instantly. Without her shield of corruption, Saraphina was exposed. She stood by a crypt, blinded by the torches. "You cattle!" she screamed. "You dare get off our land!" Mrs. Higgins shouted, throwing a bag of salt, an old folk remedy, at the vampire. It was a gesture of contempt more than harm. but it signaled the end of Saraphina's power. Alistair stepped to the very edge of the holy ground. "The spell is broken, Saraphina. You have lost. The council will hear that you were defeated not by a king, but by a baker and a washerwoman." Saraphina hissed, her form flickering. She knew she was beaten. To destroy a town was one thing. To fight a unified population that no longer feared her was another. She dissolved into a swarm of rats and scurried away into the dark, leaving only the smell of ozone and the ringing cheers of the townsfolk. The morning after the victory, the air in Raven's Creek was crisp and sweet. The sickness had vanished with the fog. Alistair and Evelyn stood on the docks, watching the ship that would take Lily to Boston. The goodbye was tearful. Lily hugged Alistair tightly. "You are more than magic, Lily," Alistair whispered to her. "You have the heart of your mother. That is the strongest magic there is." As the ship sailed away, Evelyn leaned against Alistair. The lines on her face were still there. She was still mortal, but the fear was gone. "We have enemies now," Evelyn mused. "The council will not forget." "Let them come," Alistair said, looking at the town that was waking up. Shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, fishermen mending nets, people waving up at the manor on the hill. "We have lived in the shadows for too long, Evelyn. Perhaps it is time to show the world that light and dark can coexist. Besides, I have heard the council is terrified of Mrs. Higgins." Evelyn laughed, a sound that mingled with the cry of the seagulls. She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the horizon, feeling the warmth of his cloak around her. "You saved the monster, Evelyn," Alistair whispered, his voice thick with an ancient emotion. "You proved that even in the deepest darkness, light can exist." "I didn't save a monster," she corrected softly, closing her eyes and listening to the ocean crashing below. "I saved a man who had forgotten he was human." She was Evelyn Thorne, the washerwoman queen, and her life was a tapestry woven with the richest threads of all. Courage, family, and a love that had defied the boundaries of eternity. The story of the washerwoman and the vampire king became a legend in Raven's Creek, passed down not as a horror story, but as a fairy tale of redemption. It taught the town a lesson that echoed through the generations long after the names of the gossips and the cruel judges were forgotten dust. We often navigate our lives categorizing those around us by their station, their history, or their utility to us. We build prisons of judgment, masquerading as social standards, and lock people inside them, throwing away the key. We decide who is the monster and who is the saint based on appearances, rumors, or the misfortunes they have suffered. But the walls we build to keep others out often end up imprisoning us in a narrow, colorless world. Evelyn Thorne, a woman stripped of dignity by society, possessed the only true nobility that matters, the courage to see a fellow soul in distress, and the compassion to act. She did not ask for the prisoner's resume. She did not check his bank account or his reputation. She saw suffering, and she offered relief. In doing so, she unlocked not just a cell door, but the boundless potential of a life that had been discarded. Alistair, despite his supernatural power, was helpless until someone offered him simple human kindness. This narrative reminds us that salvation often comes from the hands we least expect to hold it. It teaches us that dignity is not a title granted by a king or a mayor. It is an internal flame that we tend to ourselves, regardless of the cold winds of circumstance. True love and true friendship are not transactions of equal social standing. They are the recognition of a shared spirit. When we choose to step into the darkness to help another, we do not lose our light. We make it brighter. We must look past the rust, past the chains, past the rumors, and see the person waiting to be found. For in saving another, we often find the key to our own freedom.